Let's start with Notre Dame. We just talked about him a little bit on another show that I do, and I think
Well, plug the show. What come on,
well,
man.
yeah, on the 24/7 Sports College Football Recruiting Podcast, me and Cooper Patagna, we were kind of going through coaches that are wrapping up year 2, headed into year 3. Just kind of giving them a grade. Really, that was based on on-field performance, recruiting, transfer portal, player development. And I think we were both B plus for Marcus Freeman. And I think when you look at Notre Dame, what stands out to me in terms of the future outlook of that program is what they've done at the quarterback position. This time last year, they add Sam Hartman from Wake Forest, obviously the transfer quarterback, but they also added a high school kid we really liked, Kenny Minchie, who took a developmental year that was expected. Spin it forward to now this offseason. They're in 3 weeks plus 1 day, whatever we decided on it being. They're in line to sign CJ Carr, Lloyd Carr's grandson, borderline kind of 5-star quarterback for us. I think he's number 5 in the rankings right now, a guy that was at the Elite 11 finals. And then obviously with all this transfer portal stuff going on, there's rumors of another big name out there that could be making his way to South Bend. And then you look all the way down to the 2025 cycle. They got a young kid committed, Deuce Knight, out of the state of Mississippi, a top 247 arm for us. And he's kind of a wild card. 41-inch vertical jump, 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, left-handed, 6'4" frame. I just really like what Marcus Freeman has done in such a short amount of time when it comes to that quarterback position. And, when he takes over, I don't think that would have been one of your first thoughts. This defensive coach is going to refortify or restock or replenish, whatever word you want to use for that quarterback room. But that's what stands out to me, just kind of off the hoof about what Notre Dame has been able to do over the past year, really. And I think they're going to continue to do it because they seem to be in on quarterbacks pretty early.
You mentioned they're looking at probably a portal quarterback coming up. Just in case Minchie's not ready to take that leap, obviously we like him long-term, certainly. And I agree with you, man. I don't really think that, like, my first thought was quarterback is what Marcus Freeman was going to attack and have success with. But the recruiting game is just about stacking guys on top of guys, and then eventually some will hit, right? Like we can tell you this guy has good tools, this guy has good tools, this guy has good tools, maybe some red flags or whatever. But there's really no sure things. Even like a Trevor Lawrence, probably one of the closest things we've seen, to a sure thing, but not necessarily a sure thing in the game. So you do want to keep stacking those. And that chip they're stacking now with CJ Carr. What do you like about CJ Carr?
I love him between the ears and got to spend some time with him out at the Elite 11 finals. And I had cross paths with him. I think he threw at National Combine maybe 2 years ago when he was a youngster. And at that time, what really stood out was like he wanted to be the best kid on the field. And we're talking about an event, a camp where 1,500 kids are working out. And the quarterbacks are usually pretty cocky. They're self-aware. They know who the other quote unquote big name recruits are, the other dudes. And I just remember CJ Carr in that instance being like, all right, this is going to be me, right? Like I'm going to get the All-American Bowl invite today. And he did end up punching his ticket to it. And then, so you go to the Elite 11 finals, spend some time with him. I mean, he's just, I don't know. I could see guys kind of gravitating towards him in his leadership skills. I think he told me he's like nationally ranked in chess.com on the app. He like plays pickleball or tennis with his mom in his free time. He's just wired a little bit different. And I kind of love that. And when you turn on the tape, pro style passer, but man, when things kind of break down, his ability to create it certainly kind of stands out to me. And he has come out big over the years in the playoffs there in Michigan. He's not playing for one of the most talented teams. It seems like there are instances where he continues to elevate the players around him. So I like that about CJ Carr. We were looking forward to seeing him at the All-American Bowl. That was going to kind of be his final thing, but I believe he's either going to start classes, or it's not even early enroll anymore. He's going to show up at Notre Dame and participate in some bowl game stuff. I think he's also might get a minor procedure done on his shoulder or something like that. So unfortunate we won't see him there, but Just out of all the quarterbacks I've seen Notre Dame take kind of in recent years and having watched them and seen them at the All-Star games, CJ Carr is the one I feel the best about.
So no 5-stars so far in this Irish class, but they do have 6 players who, well, 5 who are in the national top 100, and then 1 in Keaton Young, who's rated 102nd. Out of their next 5 or 6 guys, it seems like they do have some real athletic difference makers, though. Who, one of the complaints against Notre Dame has been when they went up against like the very best teams, they weren't always hanging. Although this year, I would say if you take the jerseys off against Ohio State, there wasn't much difference athletically. Like that, those were fairly evenly matched teams. And if Notre Dame can manage to have 11 guys on the field, who knows what would have happened there at the end. Which of those guys are your favorite in this class?
Well, I think, Bud, you bring up a great point there. So like what Marcus Freeman has done at the quarterback position, but I think the entire roster has just got more athletic across the board since he's overseen the whole thing. And whether that's the second level on defense or even in the secondary, and then you flip it over to the other side of the ball, they just seem faster, a little more twitchier, a little more athletic. So I do think that is you're on to something there. And there's some of that in this recruiting class. I mean, start at the top of the list, Cam Williams, wide receiver out of the Chicagoland area. I mean, this 24 cycle is one of the deepest wide receiver cycles in recent memory. I think right now we got 8 different pass catchers that hold 5-star grades. Like, I don't really like that, but that's because these guys are that good. I mean, usually we're trying to model ourselves after the NFL draft, right? How many wide receivers every year are going in the first round? I think over the past 5 years, it's like roughly 6 or 7. So we're one over. And then that just bleeds into the top 50 and then into the top 100. And I think any other year, maybe Cam Williams is a 5-star. We'll see how all this shakes out. But he is a big body. He can go get the football. And more importantly, he can run after the catch. So I get excited about him. And you would think for Notre Dame, I mean, just with how close Chicago is, like that's a layup. And sure, it's a layup, but you still got to score the bucket. And I think that's another thing that stands out about what Marcus Freeman has done in the Irish. I mean, Bryce Young, pass rusher out of the Charlotte area. His dad's in the NFL Hall of Fame. Like, to me, that screams Notre Dame kid. But Notre Dame still has to go recruit that individual in this NIL landscape, NIL war, and get them on campus and get them committed. And Bryce Young was a big riser for us in this most recent update, moving from outside the top 247 into the top 100. He's had a heck of a senior season, 14 sacks, 18 tackles for loss. Like I said, he's got the bloodlines, also runs some track. So those are guys that I get excited about. And then Keaton Young, I mean, we know Notre Dame wants to kind of run the football. We've seen what they've done in between the tackles there. He moved up to our number 3 running back at the mid-season update. Going to get him in the All-American Bowl. But he's got some Audric to him. He's a big, rocked-up individual, and he can run you over. He can run around you, and then when he gets a crease, he's got the speed to find the end zone. So those are some of my favorite guys in Notre Dame's class.
I really like Cam Williams' game a lot. I think that's a guy who could be a difference maker for them. Maybe not year 1, but certainly by year 2, could grow into that. I also think just if you're kind of taking your notes at home and doing a little post-mortem on the season, Notre Dame really liked what it had with its young receivers this year, and it felt like they just could never stay healthy. I would read Irish Illustrated, like, oh, this guy's in a boot again. This guy's got an ankle or a hand or whatever it was. It just seemed like they never could get the right combination of guys on the field due to health at the same time. And like they have recruited some pretty athletic dudes who are real young this year. So it wouldn't totally shock me if the Irish receiving core takes a big jump next year. Like I don't think that they're totally reliant just on this class to make the difference.
Oh, but Jordan Faison, I'm like the president of his fan club. But the fact that he is playing and making plays for Notre Dame is probably not a good sign. And for those not familiar, I mean, Jordan Faison, he had the touchdown against Louisville, scored this past weekend against Stanford. He was committed to play lacrosse at Notre Dame, like signed, sealed, and delivered to play lacrosse, and started playing football later on in his prep career at a really small school in Fort Lauderdale, Pinecrest. I think they've only had, he might be the first football player that's come out of there. They've had some basketball kids, and he played in this local all-star game. It was Miami-Dade versus Broward County. It was like 2 days before Christmas last year, and he was one of the best players on the field. So we went ahead and we're like, I'm going to rank him. They're saying he could walk onto the football team, but as soon as he takes a snap, he's now a member of that 85, and sure enough, they needed him. So if he's playing, then I think Cam Williams is going to have a chance to play in 2024.
The on-field results were just so much better than they were last year too, right? Like every time they were a big favorite, they smoked the opponent. I mean, USC wasn't close. They smoked Pitt. They smoked Wake, Stanford. And we might say, yeah, some of those teams aren't very good. That's fair. But like in 2022, they screwed around with those teams. Like they lost as like a 17-point favorite and a 14-point favorite. So I do think there is some signal in every week when you're supposed to crush, you crush. And then they battled against the teams that were good teams. Like NC State, they took some punches early and then they responded and won by 21. They fought Ohio State down to the wire. Louisville was tough, but that came after a pretty tough, sequence of Ohio State, which is a heartbreaking loss. Duke, a hard-fought game, to the end. Louisville is a pretty good team, actually. Like occasionally they'll have some insane turnover luck, like when they're playing Pitt, or I guess last week against Kentucky. And then Clemson still has real athletes. Like there's no real shame in losing by a single score at Death Valley. So I kind of think Notre Dame is going in the right direction. And I don't know that I saw it in 2022. In 2022, I was like, I don't know, man. Like this, Freeman's going to need to take a big leap. And I kind of think there's something there.
I mean, you could say this about literally any program we're going to talk about, or any of the 130 FBS programs out there, but fascinated to see what they try to do in the transfer portal when it opens up. And I think I've heard some different names out there, not just the quarterback linked to them. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like Notre Dame wants to, get involved with that type of player. That to me signals, all right, this is headed in the right direction. They're aligned internally. They know what they need. There's a board in place and they're going to make moves. And I know most of the listeners on here are just focused learning these names, but look to the 2025 cycle. I think Notre Dame's got the number 5 class right now. Talking with Tom Loy, who does an excellent job covering the Irish for 24/7 Sports. He thinks they're going to add another big name, so they could be moving up even more in that cycle. So just overall, I think the arrow is pointing up when it comes to talent acquisition for the Irish.